So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are, and welcome to this DevOps.com program brought to you by Techstrong and Prisma Cloud by Palo Alto Networks. My name is Cody, and I'm the host of Techstrong Learning. We have an exciting program ahead, but first, let me just run through a couple of housekeeping notes. Today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude our live session today. If you have any questions, go ahead and send those in to us using the Q&A tab on the right side of the screen. This is about a 30-minute program today, so any questions that we don't receive or don't get to during our program today will be forwarded over to our speakers, and hope they can get to you after in a post-webinar email. Now, at the end of this program, we will be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so be sure to stick around for the duration. And our topic of discussion is the top 5 cloud native development risks. I'm joined today by Bob West, who's Chief Security Officer at Prisma Cloud. Bob, I really appreciate you being here with me. I'm going to let you take it over from here.
Welcome to the Top 5 Cloud Native Risks webinar. My name is Bob West. I'm Chief Security Officer in Palo Alto Networks Prisma Cloud Division. And my hope is that today you'll get a very clear understanding of the general business environment that we're operating in, the top 5 native security risks, as I mentioned, what the best practices are for protecting information in the cloud, and then we'll leave you with some resources. So with that, let's get started. One of the interesting things is how much the business environment has changed even in just 2 years. So we did a study, and 2 years ago, that 31% of organizations had more than half of their workloads in the cloud. In 2022, we're up to 70%. And at the same time, 50% of organizations lacked internal knowledge about cloud native security, in addition to not understanding the risks. So if you think about it, implementation and adoption of the cloud is going like this. And at the same time, organizations don't understand the risks. And getting more specific in terms of what we're seeing, there's a number of security challenges that come along with the ride to move code to cloud. One of the first ones is that there are insecure configurations, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Defaults have vulnerabilities associated with them. And then there's a number of cloud hosts that have known vulnerabilities but have not been addressed. And finally, information in the cloud in many cases is not being encrypted. And when you put all of that together, it creates a challenging environment. And diving a little deeper into this, one of the biggest challenges is in code security, which makes a lot of sense because if you think of the average developer in an organization, they've not been taught how to code security in school when they were learning how to code. And so what happens unless the organization teaches them how to code securely, they don't understand the issues, and a number of basic security mistakes are made when coding. And if you think of an analogy I like to use regularly is when a car rolls off the assembly line, you don't say, let's add quality now, right? It's a function of the manufacturing process. And if the defects are severe enough, then there are recalls. And if the recalls if the defects are severe enough, there's recalls. And while that's a significant cost, the biggest issue is in damage to brand and reputation. And security breaches I see as analogous to recalls, where they're expensive. It takes a lot of time to address them, but the bigger issue is damage to brand and reputation in a company. So long-winded message is that organizations need to focus on, number one, teaching their developers how to code securely, and then secondly, using tools throughout the development life cycle during the implementation and testing so that the right level of protecting code is achieved. And following up on that, you can't secure what you don't understand. So the notion of containers in cloud environments, this is one of the ways where applications are packaged and transitioned into production in the cloud. The management of applications is something that needs to be done, and really understanding what goes bump in the night is something that needs to be achieved. And I'll talk about visibility into infrastructure and applications in a little bit. And microservices, it's a subset of everything that's going on. You're decomposing an application into modular services. And all of these things need to be understood. So let's dive a little bit deeper into this. Application vulnerabilities, as I was saying, are a significant issue, and it's important to make sure that developers understand that this is something that needs to be paid attention to. In many organizations, security is the business prevention unit. So they're the guys and gals that say no. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But ultimately, if an organization is executing properly, the security organization, and in particular, the people that are responsible for teaching the organization on the issues associated with code, there's a partnership that's created. And that's what we need to achieve. 96% of third-party containers that are deployed into the cloud can contain known vulnerabilities. And of that, 91% of critical or high vulnerabilities are found in images. Infrastructure misconfigurations is another significant issue. So think of it this way. In infrastructure management, we're always dealing with misconfigurations and new issues. So we have Microsoft's Patch Tuesday, the application vendors that are publishing new issues. And traditional infrastructure, this is just part of what we do. And I think one of the things that most organizations don't understand is, as you move to the cloud, you not only need to have visibility into what's happening, but you also need to understand what are the issues that I'm dealing with. And misconfiguration is one of the basics that we see. And if you can see here on the screen, 21% of security scans that are run against large SaaS providers identify misconfigurations. And again, this is nothing new, and it makes complete sense. Malware is something that we continue to wrestle with. And if you think of how malware has evolved over time, I started working in security in '95, and the issues that we dealt with at the time were more disruptive malware, right? You think back to Nimda and Code Red in the early 2000s. Their goal was to disrupt operations in large organizations. We're now dealing with malware whose focus is to steal intellectual property. And ransomware is something that we're going to be dealing with in the foreseeable future. And typically how ransomware gets loaded is someone clicks on an email, on a link, malware gets downloaded onto a system. And now, if the organization is being managed properly, ransomware becomes a really significant issue, going to the extreme with Colonial Pipeline, for example, where not only did they pay a 7-figure ransom in 2021, but their ability to distribute petroleum and gasoline across the East Coast was disrupted. And that's what we're dealing with now. So it's a radically different environment than we were dealing with in the past. I mention that because there's a lot of people in infrastructure management who will make the statement, well, this is the way we've done it forever. And while that may be true, the business environment that we're operating in now is different than the past. And the aggressiveness of malware is substantially different than it was in the past. So we need to pivot in terms of how we manage environments. The next issue that we deal with, one of the top 5 issues that we deal with in cloud environments, is over-provision access. One recent global study noted that 99% of cloud users have excessive permissions in their roles and in services and resources that they are granted. And this is not a new issue. In traditional infrastructure, over provisioning is a pervasive issue. And when you think about it, think of if you join an organization and you're there for a given period of time, most people will change roles during their tenure at an organization. And what happens is they're granted access to the new systems that they need to do their job while maintaining the access to the applications they had in their previous role. And so there's an accumulation of rights that happens. It's not any different in the cloud. The challenge is that you have to have the right set of provisioning tools in the cloud, and most legacy provisioning solutions don't allow you to provision and deprovision and change access as you're operating in the cloud. So again, this is something that makes a lot of sense. The final cloud native risk that we see is insecure APIs. So this is just part of the table stakes that you have when you're operating in the cloud. So you need to keep an eye on, number one, what kind of APIs are you using? Are they being updated on the regular basis? And has the organization created formalized processes in terms of how it scans APIs for security vulnerabilities, how they're distributed, and how they're managed throughout their life cycle? So these are the things that you need to pay attention to as you migrate in the cloud and as you're operating in the cloud. So here are the 5 best practices that should be achieved so that you minimize the risk to issues in the cloud. First, treating security as a team sport, reducing complexity in the number of vendors that you deal with, using tools that are designed to manage cloud native cloud environments, with a particular focus on development, automate early and often. And the final thing is gaining visibility into what's happening across a multi-cloud, multi-vendor environment. So let me dig into this a little bit more. As I was telling you before, developers and security architects and engineers need to understand what they need to do to protect information as part of their jobs. Again, I go back to, you need to build security in. We talk about shifting security left, which basically means building security in. Similar to quality, if an organization has quality as a priority, it's going to be something that they do intentionally. And people need to understand what it means to the organization. They need to understand their role in terms of achieving the right level of quality in the products they produce. In a similar way, people that are responsible for infrastructure and for development need to understand what it is that they need to be doing on a day-to-day basis. And as importantly, what's the context behind it, right? Why should I be injecting security into the development life cycle as I manage it, as I develop applications? And it's really a function of what I was talking about earlier, that the risks have changed, they're aggressive. And if you don't have the right level of security built into the infrastructure ecosystem, both traditional and in the cloud, then it increases the chance of having a significant security breach. And you're never going to get rid of breaches, right? They're going to happen. The ideal scenario is, rather than having a 5-alarm fire, that you have a brush fire, and that's much easier to deal with in a very broad context. The other thing I would say in terms of collaboration is that it needs to be communicated to the board of directors and to the leadership team that security needs to be a priority number one, and that organizations need to have the resources and budget to protect information. And if you achieve that, then it's much easier to achieve collaboration across an organization. The second best practice is to adapt a concept, I can speak English, but just not today, adopting a comprehensive platform approach. So most organizations have dozens, if not hundreds, of applications and platforms in the cloud that they're using to run their businesses. And most platforms have good native security tools. So Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Salesforce, Workday, et cetera, they all have good security tools. The problem is it's very difficult, if not impossible, to use native tools in a large, complex, multi-cloud environment. And using one set of tools to protect those environments is much, much easier. It creates predictability. When there are issues, you can make changes in one place. And it also allows you to have visibility into what's happening versus using a multitude of different tools. So the ideal scenario is that you're using one consistent set of tools in the DevSecOps environment and protecting information consistently across a multi-cloud environment. The next best practice is using security tools designed for cloud native development. So there's a number of tools that exist in traditional application development environments, but they simply don't work in Dev and SecOps. And it's not just limited to Dev and SecOps. The same thing holds true in terms of infrastructure management, in terms of tools that allow you to understand anything that's unusual that's happening. So anywhere from traditional SIM tools to identity solutions, encryption tools, et cetera. And so using tools that are cloud native to protect information in the cloud and in development is what needs to be achieved. Then the next one is automating the development process, especially when you have global environments and complex environments. If you don't automate, things just tend to slip through the cracks. And so automating the development, the implementation, the testing of applications is something that needs to be achieved. And a couple of the reasons that you want to do that is there's always limited resources. And if you put the burden on developers to execute these tasks manually, it's really time consuming, and people have a very high level of stress to begin with, and there's the issue of burnout. So the more automation that you inject into a cloud native environment, you'll not only be able to protect information more consistently across the environment, but you'll be taxing the developers much less. And then finally, having visibility across multiple clouds in one consistent place is the ideal scenario to be in. When I speak to organizations, I always tell them you need to have visibility into everything across the ecosystem, with development being one aspect of it. And if you don't have visibility into it, then you won't understand when you have unusual events, and you won't be able to respond to them. So if you have one unified method of having visibility across the development environment, then you'll be able to protect information much more consistently. You'll have fewer operational issues. It's tremendously helpful across the board. So I would leave you with a couple of things. If you don't remember anything, try and remember these. The first thing is that organizations have moved to the cloud, and as a consequence, there's DevOps that has really become a focal point of organizations. The pipeline has expanded significantly, and as a consequence, the attack surface in enterprises has expanded significantly. Managing and securing the DevOps pipeline using cloud native tools is the ideal scenario. If you're using tools that aren't tuned for a cloud native environment, it becomes really challenging to protect information. So think of trying to use a screwdriver when in fact you need a hammer, or vice versa. Using cloud native tools allows you to protect the DevOps pipeline in a best-in-class way. Organizations are spending a lot of money in moving to the cloud, but the fact that you're spending a lot of money doesn't necessarily mean that you're adopting the cloud successfully or protecting information successfully in the cloud, you have to have a consistent process to do it. DevSecOps integration and security automation are key to achieving successful cloud adoption. We talk to all of our partners, and the feedback that they give us is that the tools that we bring to the table to protect their cloud environments allow them to sell more tools. But more importantly, from an enterprise perspective, using the right set of tools not only allows you to achieve cloud adoption successfully, but it also allows you to protect the environment successfully. And finally, the last principle that I'd leave you with is that minimizing the number of security vendors that you use and vendors in general allows you to more successfully move applications to the cloud and protect environments securely. And this is something that, again, it applies to traditional infrastructure. The more vendors and the more moving parts that you have, the more difficult it is to protect an environment. Complexity is the enemy of protecting information. And so while you'll never get down to one vendor, reducing it to as few vendors as possible, and then having the smallest number of security tools to protect the environment is what you need to achieve. And then going beyond this, I would say that there's a lot of security organizations that don't communicate with and don't partner with the business or technology organizations within their enterprise and with their partners. And that's one of the things that needs to be focused on. Communicate early and often. Make sure that you understand who's on the other side of the fence in your cloud partners, and achieve truly a partnership with the internal stakeholders. This is a journey, and you don't achieve this overnight. But partnering with internal and external stakeholders and making sure that they understand that you're approaching this from a win-win perspective, that's going to allow you to achieve a successful implementation and reduce risk to a minimum. That's the end of my presentation, and I'd love to take some questions from you. So I'll pause and give you some time to ask your questions. There's a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, so let me start there. The first one is, what is the importance and role of cloud native development for Prisma platform and cloud security solutions? As I was saying before, the ideal approach is to use a platform approach, and secondly, to use native tools in development. And that's what Prisma Cloud is all about. We have one set of tools that allow you to protect information in the development lifecycle across a multi-cloud platform. So that is one of the things that we can do to help you in your environments. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I have another question here. Do point security solutions have a future if cloud security continues to move towards SASE? And then the second part of the question is asked differently: are point solutions, are they reaching a natural obsolescence? So let me respond to that a couple of ways. Historically, there have been very few vendors that have come to the table with a comprehensive set of best-in-class security solutions. As you move to the cloud, it becomes much more challenging to protect information in environments that you don't control. But if you have a set of best-in-class solutions and point solutions, it becomes much harder to protect the environment. So I think that there will continue to be a place for point solutions, but they won't have the same prevalence as they do right now. So I think over time, the number of point solutions will be reduced, and it just makes sense, right? Because you do want to be using a platform approach as much as possible and reduce the number of tools and processes you can. The final question that has come in from the audience is, are there any particular features or capabilities that Prisma is rolling out in the near future that help address the risks highlighted in the reports that have been published recently by Palo Alto, in particular our Unit 42 business unit? So the three key areas that we're focusing on a go-forward basis, which we haven't in the past, are software composition analysis, secret scanning, and supply chain security. And let me address them with last going first. So supply chain security is something, and in particular in the software supply chain, is something that is particularly important. If you're not paying attention to the supply chain, risks are created, risks get injected into code. And so you really want to be looking at the overall software supply chain and making sure that you understand what issues there are and you have the tools to address them. And one of the ways to do that is with software composition analysis tools. As you're looking at software in the supply chain and otherwise, software composition analysis tools will allow you to understand, are there any security issues within the software itself as well as the software supply chain? And scanning for secrets is something that's important to do as well. You want to understand, are there any issues with intellectual property that is injected in the code that are being used within an application? And if you focus on those three things on a go-forward basis, it's part of the recipe of keeping risk to a minimum. And that's why we're focused on those areas on a go-forward basis. If you have any questions after the webinar is completed, please feel free to reach out to us. We would highly encourage you to download our report. You should see a link to it on your screen. And once we have the questions that you've asked, we'll shoot you an email with the majority of the questions. We're always here for you. We know time is limited, and we appreciate your taking the time to tune into this webinar. Thank you so much.
Well, Bob, thank you so much. I know we only had about 30 minutes for today's program, so I do appreciate the time that we did have. All questions that we received that Bob was not able to get to, we are going to make sure that he receives them, and he will be able to respond to you with appropriate answers. So we do still have those 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give out, and our winners are Joshua C., Kiwi M., Pat G., and Mauricio H. So to our 4 winners, please keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. But if you don't happen to see that email, please do check your spam folder. I'd like to thank Prisma Cloud for sponsoring our program today. And to everyone who's joined us today, please, we really appreciate you spending time with us. Please stick around for a survey that will pop up on your screen as soon as we close out. We'd really like to hear your feedback on what you liked about our program today, or maybe what you'd like to hear on an upcoming program. Otherwise, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong learning experience. Have a great rest of your day. And to Bob and the whole Prisma Cloud team, thank you once more.